Well, welcome to the Energizing America podcast, where we talk all things energy, why we need this in our business, our economy, and our life. And boy, we have an energetic person. Welcome, Kate, from the
Thank you.
Duluth Port Authority.
Yep.
I got that right?
Duluth Seaway Port Authority.
The
Yep.
Seaway. Why the Seaway?
Well, that's a good question. So thanks for having me. It's really nice to be here. The Duluth Seaway Port Authority was created by the Minnesota legislature as an entity that was going to assist in cultivating international trade in the port of Duluth-Superior. So although our port has been around since the 1800s, we've been shipping iron ore since the 1800s out of this port. The international connection to the Atlantic Ocean was really formalized and kind of finalized and put into place when the Seaway system was installed, and that was in the 1950s. So the St. Lawrence Seaway system of locks and dams and channels, they were opened in 1959 to the use of international vessels. Minnesota said, wait a minute, there's nobody that is in Minnesota that wants and focuses and is intentionally attracting international business into the port of Duluth-Superior. The Duluth Seaway Port Authority was formed. We are a quasi-governmental agency. I believe technically a city agency, although our board is made up of state appointees, county appointees, and city appointees. So we really are regional when it comes to focus. Our mission is the same today as it was when we were established in the 1950s. That is to bring business to the port, economic development to the region, and then do advocacy for maritime transportation and, of course, the industries that transportation and maritime support.
Okay, so the mission might be the same, but it seems like the success is there. We see, when you come into Duluth and you come down the hill and the big bridge is up and there's a ship coming in and there's tourism
amazing,
there
isn't it?
watching it. There's folks that are coming in for the first time maybe on the ship and seeing what Duluth has to offer. I took a Uber ride down in Dallas, Texas. This is several years ago now. And the guy has an Australian accent. We start talking and he asks me where I'm from. And I say Duluth, Minnesota. And he says, are you kidding me? I log into the webcam of the bridge every day because he just dreams of coming here someday to
love
see
that.
this ship traffic. And I'm telling him, well, I get to see it out of the window of my house, right? It's pretty incredible.
wonderful.
It's an awesome deal. But we've gotten involved at Westcom in a lot of different projects out in the port. And as we did that, I started reading more and more about what the Port Authority does and just the overall impact of the port. Can you speak to what kind of a economic and just overall impact the port has, not just on the Twin Ports, but actually in America and then even globally?
The Twin Ports here are the Port of Duluth-Superior, and I want to be really clear, although our agency says Duluth Seaway Port Authority, we really are very agnostic to which side of the harbor that we work on and focus on, because as a harbor, we are globally seen as one port. We really, when I talk about bringing business to the port, I don't care if it's Superior, Duluth, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and then our regional component, up to the international border, into Wisconsin, into Michigan, we even touch. Some of our commodities even touch all the way out to the mountainous states, so in Canada. So it's a big deal. In Duluth-Superior alone, for port jobs, we're talking about 8,000 jobs that are related to port. That's not ancillary jobs. That's not railroads. That's not truckers. That's port-related jobs is 8,000 jobs. We are the number one port by tonnage, by volume, through the Great Lakes system. So we are still number one, and we are top 20 in the nation. So we are definitely one of the nation's most critical ports and waterways. We handle about 35 million tons of cargo a year. We have over 800 vessel visits a year. There's a Martin study the study is being done by an organization called Martin, and they're currently doing a new one. So they update our numbers every about 5 years for the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. As a part of that, we in the port of Duluth-Superior also do one for us here.
Okay.
The last one was, I believe, 2018, and that was the port of Duluth-Superior at 8,000 jobs and generates approximately $1.8 billion in business revenue.
That's an incredible number. And
That
I
is an
think that's what
incredible
has been
number.
so surprising to me is we go visit one grain elevator or a spot that's bringing in cement. And like everyone you go to, you hear about another opportunity or another business that's related to it. And you're like, how many of these are there?
Yeah.
And then I start digging in and you see 8,000 direct jobs related to the
Right.
port. And then you think about, I know that we have 20 electricians that are operating out of this area that are directly impacted by that. We have automation techs
Yeah.
who are programming things for that. And we're just one little small business in this area doing it. So
Yeah, it's amazing, right? How far that spread is. And remember that in Duluth-Superior, we're not just talking about the businesses that are here. You know, a lot of these shipping companies are located elsewhere on the Great Lakes, all around the world. They all need services when they're here too.
right.
So it's not just the facilities, it's actually I call them kind of cities on the water, right? The vessels are their own little cities on the water. They need all kinds of services too, and we get to provide those. We're also, as a port, super lucky to have Fraser shipyards here in Duluth-Superior. You know, all ships need service. We are able to capture some of that winter service in our region and supporting regional jobs here because we have a shipyard, very full service port. So that's a really great benefit to our region too.
Which is probably one of the reasons why we're number one in the Great Lakes area is because we have those types of things.
We have a lot of assets, a lot of capabilities here in the Port of Duluth-Superior. Yep.
You know, you just think about little old Duluth and being the number one there, and the winter challenges and all of the challenges of getting that freight internationally over to here,
Right.
in or out. It's an incredible amount of work that the entire port does. Not,
Yes.
I mean, obviously you guys as an agency and then everyone around you actually
Yeah,
doing the work.
The Port of Duluth-Superior is actually really unique in how we operate. So a lot of ports, like you think about the LA Long Beaches of the world, and the Port Authority, own the entire port area and lease out portions of the port, the industrial waterfront, to different businesses in order for them to work. We're very different, the Duluth Seaway Port Authority, because most of our facilities on our waterfront here in Duluth and Superior privately held. And the reason is because they started in the 1800s. So 1800s, these businesses established, or the business before the current business established. We're coming in on the backside saying, you know, how can we help you? They are not providing us revenue. We are truly just a support agency for those companies and making sure that they are finding success and if they need any help with anything, that we can be there for that. But we also provide the advocacy piece that as a whole, we have grain terminals and coal terminals and iron ore terminals and all of these things, and they can each sell for themselves, but there was no agency to kind of advocate for the whole. And that's what we really get to do, even though we don't earn any revenue from them.
That's probably another reason why it's a success, right? Is because you're coming in after they've already done the legwork of getting the product. No, you're just trying to help them.
A lot of legwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why do we never read about the Duluth and Superior Port? Anytime you read about transportation and shipping challenges, the picture is always the LA port. And
Yeah.
you're telling me that we're one of the top 20.
We are. And the Seaway system, the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system is 8 U.S. states, 2 Canadian provinces. If we created our own little country around the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system, it would have the 3rd largest GDP in the world. This is an economic hub here in the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway system. The 3rd largest GDP in the world if we were our own little country.
That's
8
incredible.
states and 2 Canadian provinces. So, yeah, it is incredible. Why don't we read about it? Well, I hope you're reading the Duluth News Tribune because we try to get on there as much as possible.
No, we do. When we got involved, Westcom did. That's what I think it was a surprise for me when I realized just how big the port was, because I
Yeah.
always figured, well, yeah, the Great Lakes has just some, Great Lakes ships that stay within the Great Lakes. Well, not so anymore.
Well, I'm surprised you know that there's Great Lakes ships that stay in the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
That's probably one of our biggest challenges is just the education piece. Everybody knows about the 3 coasts in the United States, East, West, Gulf. Very few people know about what we would call the fourth seacoast, which is the Great Lakes. And that's part of my job, is to go around the world and tell people that these assets and transportation connections and hubs and multimodal capabilities are available through the Great Lakes. I think another reason that maybe you don't hear about the Great Lakes as much as some of the coastal ports is the size of vessel, the economies of size and scale. You know, our system was created in the 1950s, which means that, and it hasn't been updated since then. I mean, don't get me wrong, there have been absolutely phenomenal improvements made in the seaway system. They have what's called hands-free mooring now. They've made financial investments to make the system much more reliable, much more optimized for timing and efficient, and the locks work. And but the reality is we still handle what's called a handy size vessel into our waterway. 740 feet long by 78 feet wide by 26 foot 6 inches in depth. That is the size of vessel we can handle into our ports and waterway. Very, very different size than these mega ships that get stuck in the Suez Canal. You know what I mean.
Sure.
Those are the size of vessels that you see off the port of LA Long Beach, that you see stacking up when the pandemic happens, that are carrying the majority of our containerized consumer goods. So we're natural resources, mostly natural resource-based system. And I think we just haven't been celebrated enough when it comes to all the other pieces that we could be a part of when it comes to the supply chain for the globe.
Yeah, I think that's what, when I was reading more into it and as we've gotten more involved, what I've realized as well is that it's like anything, the things that we take for granted, the grain that makes the bread, we don't think about it, right? We think about the bread,
Absolutely.
which better be coming in, but we tend to forget about the grain that might be coming from South Dakota via rail over to the Twin Ports that then gets put on, in a silo for so much time.
Or the iron ore that we mine right here in Minnesota that is responsible for 80% of the United States first pour steel.
Right.
That's your car. That's your car. That's your refrigerator. That's your, all of those things. Buildings, structural steel, everything we rely on.
And which is probably another reason why we're number one, right? You in the Great
Huge.
Lakes, because a lot of that stuff is actually mined right in our neck of the woods.
Right in our backyard.
So it's a short train ride down, and then it's into the system, and
That's right.
off it goes. What about we can't discount, though, those out the states around us of the economic impact that they also bring
Absolutely.
in. Especially farming, maybe? Mainly?
Agriculture is a big one. Last year, we shipped just under 700,000 tons of grain through our port. That is about half of what is typical. Market conditions are a little tough on grain right now, but we're feeding the world with that. But then those terminals are handling additional grain as well. So they're actually domestically supplying a lot of grain that's coming in from the fields, being stored in their houses and sent off to a domestic miller to make our Barilla pastas that are on our shelf, and our North Dakota mill wheat flour that's in our homes. So, definitely agriculture is a huge player.
So we got iron ore, we got agricultural, we got coal.
Yes, coal. Coal is a bit of a sad story, a four-letter word, as we all know. We're seeing our energy demands in the United States and around the world really change. We used to ship 22.5 million tons of coal out of the port of Duluth-Superior, and now we are under 7 million tons of coal with an anticipated drop from there coming. And so that is certainly something that we continue at the Port Authority and regional economic development folks to really focus on what can we find, what can we do to kind of replace some of that tonnage, if not replace it, find new markets, find a new commodity, what does that look like? And the folks at Midwest Energy and Koch Industries are doing a great job of, utilizing the terminal there that handles our coal to try different things to reach a global market. They have shipped out some petroleum coke out of that facility in the last 2 years that went overseas to the European market. So they are looking at ways to utilize such a great asset that we have in Midwest Energy for something else in the future.
Sometimes it's easy to give up when you see an industry like that go through all of its transition, right? And you have this beautiful facility right in a perfect spot.
It's the best coal loading facility on the Great Lakes. It's amazingly efficient.
Right, and it's got the rail coming straight from Wyoming or wherever it's coming from, but how, rather than being disappointed in it, which that's there, but how do we capitalize on what is still there? Whether it's coal or not, the facility is still there, the Great Lake is still there, the Port Authority is still there, all the great employees are still there.
That's right.
We got to put it to some good use.
Yeah, we agree, and it's certainly a focus of a group of us to try to find that next thing. It is a challenge to kind of find your next niche in supply chain, just because you kind of got to work with what you have and what you're good at. Like iron ore, right in our backyard, we're mining it. Of course, we're going to ship it out. We've got to find something that can backfill that property and use it well.
So, iron ore is such a big piece of what we're shipping out of here, and we do it well. Do you get concerned about what's going to happen in the next 10 to 15 years of iron ore or whatever the commodity is that we're shipping out of here?
Yeah, we're yes and no. The Iron Range is healthy, which is great. We, of course, see the cyclical nature that is the steel industry. But iron ore is healthy. So do we worry about the iron ore industry? Not as much, but what we worry about, or not even worry about, but think about, is that next stage of iron ore, right? So 50 years ago, they were able to ship rock that had a high enough iron content and just chuck it right in the blast furnace. Now we ship a taconite pellet that they've had to crush the rock and concentrate it and make it into a product that flows well. And so now we got all these little marbles that are perfect for the blast furnace. And you're starting to see some of that transition, it seems like, for iron ore, where we're kind of looking at what is taconite 2.0? What does that look like? We're starting to see DR grade pellets. We're starting to see, more on the electric arc furnace instead of kind of the blast furnace, although the electric arc can't quite get the quality of a blast furnace yet. That technology is advancing. So I do think that one of the things we are concerned with iron ore is we see all the blast furnaces around the Great Lakes. They're on the shores of the Great Lakes. We're not seeing the same trend with electric arc furnaces. They are all over the place. Arkansas, so they're more inland. So what does the future of shipping iron ore on the Great Lakes look like? I think we're still all trying to figure that out. And this is a regional, national kind of discussion that we at the Duluth Seaway Port Authority are particularly interested in advancing that conversation and kind of seeing what that looks like for the future, not only for ourselves, but for Minnesota's economy.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that
it's huge.
I'm glad you guys are thinking about it in advance, because anything that's under transition, whether it's just starting or whether it's gonna happen, the people who win are the ones who are at the front end of it, right?
It's true.
So you think about, we went from 22.5 million tons of coal, you said, shipped out of here, down to just under 7 or around 7 and further declining. But what we haven't seen is that the port and the economic importance of the port drop in the same proportion.
Yeah, that's true. It's
we haven't seen
it stayed very relevant.
It stayed very relevant,
Yes.
It's my belief that it's going to only continue to stay super relevant when you think about this little, I don't know if you call it renaissance or whatever's happening in our country and just globally. Like, we love the global economic stage, but the reality is when there's disruptions, it hurts. And so I think there's a lot of, I know folks that we visit with at Westcom within industry, whether you're talking about mining or fossil fuels, whatever the industry is, there's a lot of talk about more reliability from within. And as that happens, we're going to need transportation is not going away.
Transportation is not going away. Freight is, especially consumer good freight, is scheduled to go up by 30% in the next 20 years or something. I don't have the statistic right, but it is substantial how much more freight we expect in the next 30 to 50 years. And on the Great Lakes, we may be losing coal, but we've gained wind energy, and we're handling gensets. And we just saw a huge tractor that was brought into our facility leave today over the road out to the Dakotas to go into use in a farm field. So we still are very, we're diverse here in the Port of Duluth-Superior. We're advancing different types of cargo and commodity while we see some of the decline in these other things. So our Duluth Cargo Connect terminal, you just heard about our new container service that now is going to operate on a regular schedule between Duluth and Antwerp. We just had the first ship last week on that. So we're finally seeing a regular, not only containers, but that had the farm equipment on it, and it had some other commodities on it. So that's exciting too, because we are seeing an energy revolution. The Port of Duluth-Superior is still a part of that energy revolution because we can handle those different commodities too.
And I think, Kate, that's where you guys are getting it right. Rather than getting caught up in a specific item that we're not handicapping ourselves, that we will only be involved in this specific item. But no, instead, the big story is we have this amazing waterway, by the way, the cleanest and coolest one there is, right? We have this awesome employees in this neck of the woods who will work their tail off for these folks who come in here. And so it doesn't matter what the commodity or what the item is that goes through here as much as how good we are at doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we are so efficient and effective. And one point I wanted to make today was I also think that there's going to be a transition in the next 10 years, like you kind of mentioned, when companies are really looking at greening of their supply chain. I hate that term, but the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Seaway System is really talking about being a green corridor. Shipping by boat is the most efficient, energy efficient way to ship high volume goods as well as high weight goods. And so we on the Great Lakes can actually ship a ton of cargo 600 miles on a gallon of fuel by ship. So I think that there is going to be some additional focus in the next 10 years on utilizing our waterways as green modes of transportation. And I think that is going to go a really long way to help us find that. What is that next commodity? How do we keep moving forward and advancing what we're operating and doing through the Port of Duluth-Superior? That's another good component to think about, and that we're going to try to really use as a marketing strategy and sales strategy to say, especially European customers who are really looking at the carbon being used and burned at every step of their cargo transition. And so I think we're going to be able to capitalize on that in the future.
There's something funny that happens too. We don't like the word green, when we're talking. Sometimes it can be difficult. The fact is, though, if you think about money being green, oftentimes what happens is it does truly translate to an economic benefit for those involved. So as it gets better and more widely adapted to use that mode of transportation for cargo or whatever it will be, we'll start to see efficiencies built into the system and hopefully even some cost savings for those folks in the long run.
And I hope that somebody learned something. And we are always open to, hosting groups and trade teams and even just folks that have questions. DuluthPort.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.